All right, let's just jump right in. We're going to unpack a story of escalating conflict. I mean, it's really a series of showdowns in the Gospel of Mark. You have Jesus going head to head with the religious traditions of his day. It's just brilliant storytelling, and you'll see how it all builds up to one pretty radical claim.
So you've got to understand, these stories, they don't just pop up out of nowhere. The writer, Mark, is super intentional here. He stacks them one after another like dominoes, just building this incredible tension. It's all to show us this growing chasm, right? This huge division between Jesus and the religious establishment. I mean, even before we get to the main events for today, the pressure was already cranked way up. First, remember, Jesus touched a leper, a huge no-no for the purity laws. Then he ups the ante and claims the authority to forgive sins. And his critics are thinking, whoa, hold on, only God can do that. And then, to top it all off, he throws a party with tax collectors, basically the most despised people around. So you can see, right, with every single move, things are just getting more and more intense. And that brings us to our first big showdown. The whole argument shifts. It's not just about Jesus' personal actions anymore. Now it's about the practices of his followers, and it centers on a really, really ingrained religious tradition. Fasting. So some people come up and ask this question, but let's be real. This is not just a casual, hey, I'm curious kind of thing. No way. This is a direct challenge. They're essentially saying, look, all the really religious people, John's disciples, the Pharisees, they're all fasting. So why aren't yours? What kind of teacher are you anyway? It's a total jab at his authority. And Jesus' answer is, it's just brilliant. He totally reframes the entire situation. He doesn't get bogged down in a debate about the technicalities of fasting. Nope. Instead, he paints this vivid picture of a wedding party, and he casts himself as the bridegroom. And I mean, come on, who fasts at a wedding? You don't mourn at a wedding, you celebrate. It's a party. So here's the core of it, right? Fasting, at its heart, is all about experiencing lack. It's about a sense of longing for something that isn't there. But Jesus is saying, hello, I'm right here. I am the fulfillment you've been waiting for. So fasting while he's physically present, that would be as ridiculous as going on a hunger strike in the middle of a wedding feast. The two things just don't go together. It's joy versus lack. And to really hammer this point home, he gives them two killer metaphors. First, he talks about an old piece of clothing. Think about it. You can't just take a brand new, unshrunk patch and sew it onto an old, worn-out coat. Right? The first time you wash it, that new patch is going to shrink, and it's just going to rip the old fabric to shreds, making the hole even worse. His point? This new thing he's bringing, you can't just slap it onto the old system. It won't work. And he immediately follows that up with another one, just as powerful, old wineskins. You just don't pour new, still fermenting wine into old, brittle wineskins. Why? Because as that new wine ferments, it expands, it bubbles up, and those old, inflexible skins, they'll just burst. They can't handle it. The message is crystal clear. This new reality Jesus is introducing is so dynamic, so powerful, so alive, that the old religious structures, they just can't contain it. They're not built for it. Okay, so let's move on to the next encounter because you can just feel it building. The conflict is about to go from a simmer to a full-on boil. We're moving past debates about tradition, and we're heading straight for one of the most sacred pillars of Jewish law, the Sabbath itself. The scene is pretty simple. It's the Sabbath, and Jesus and his disciples are walking through a grain field. They get hungry, so they start picking some heads of grain to eat. Well, the Pharisees see this, and they just pounce. Now, the issue wasn't that they were eating the grain. That was totally fine. The accusation was that by plucking it, they were technically reaping or harvesting. And that was considered work, which was a huge, huge no-no on the Sabbath. Now, instead of apologizing or backing down, Jesus launches this brilliant three-part defense. And this isn't some emotional rant. It's a structured, logical, almost rabbinic-style argument. It's the kind of reasoning his opponents would have totally understood. He's absolutely meeting them on their own turf here. So, step one, he hits them with a precedent from Scripture they just can't argue with, the story of King David. He says, hey, remember when David and his men were on the run and starving? They went into the temple and ate the consecrated bread, the showbread, which was legally only for the priests to eat. Everyone knew the story, and the Pharisees would have agreed with the conclusion. David's immediate human need, it trumped the ritual law in that moment. Okay, so once he's laid that groundwork, that precedent, Jesus moves to step two. He states the core principle behind the entire law. And what he says next is, it's absolutely radical. He's not just offering a new interpretation of a rule here, he is claiming to know the fundamental purpose behind the law in the first place. And the implication here is, well, it's revolutionary. He's basically telling the religious leaders, you've got it all backward. He's saying, you've taken the Sabbath, which was meant to be a gift, and you've turned it into a heavy burden. See, the whole point, the original intent from God, was for the Sabbath to serve people, to give them rest, to restore them. But they had flipped it, turning it into this harsh master that people had to serve even if it meant they went hungry.
But he doesn't stop there. Just when you think he's made his point, he takes his argument one final, absolutely shocking step further. This is where the whole thing pivots. The debate is no longer about how to interpret the law. It becomes a direct, stunning claim about who he is.
Now, to really get the weight of his final line, we have to understand this title he keeps using for himself, the Son of Man. To our modern ears, that might sound kind of humble, like he's just saying he's a human being. But that is not what it meant. In its original context from the book of Daniel, the Son of Man is this powerful divine figure who receives an everlasting kingdom from God, who judges the world, and who has total authority over, well, everything. So with that understanding of Son of Man, his final statement just lands like a thunderclap. This is the knockout punch, the culmination of this whole escalating argument. He's not just some rabbi with a clever new interpretation. No, he's claiming ultimate, divine authority. I mean, just stop and think about what he's actually claiming here. He's not saying, I'm an expert on the Sabbath. He's saying, I am the Lord of the Sabbath. The only reason he can declare the law's true purpose is because he has authority over the law itself. And you have to ask yourself, who has authority over God's law? The answer is pretty simple. Only God. And that's where Mark leaves the story, with the tension cranked all the way up. It's not about fasting or picking grain anymore, is it? The conflict has hit its absolute peak, and it forces everyone, the characters in the story and us reading it today, to face one final, massive question. If someone claims to be the Lord of God's own law, well, who are they really claiming to be?